was a fairly regular smoker, never gave any importance to sleep. This has to be a wholesome approach. It's not a quick fix. Consistency beats intensity. Our lifespan has gone up. But if you look around, you will find that people are living the marginal decade in a very bad situation. So you got to get to a stage where that inflection point comes, where you stop working for money and the money starts working for you. Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world, called the power of compounding. In Indian context, you should not confuse investing with insurance.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on where you're joining us from for this very relevant episode of Towards a Better World on Thinkly, where I, Ayon Banerjee, will be having a conversation that's very close to my heart. This July, I turned a year older. Having slowed down relatively in recent years, I obviously try to constantly measure the perceptible changes in my life since my last birthday. And there are many, even when the externals seem to have barely changed. I can sense my body a little older than before, with some new limits added to the old limitations. My mind, too, is undergoing its own aging process, sometimes acting elderly and serious, and sometimes playful and fun. I no longer possess the razor-sharp memory of my youth, and I need to write down telephone numbers. Honest confession, sometimes I actually need to write down names too. Some of my contemporaries have been placed under medication for lifestyle ailments, and then there are some who have already departed for their next planes of existence. Yes, friends, no matter how much we romanticize it, growing older is not sexy. It's like crossing over to the second half of a wonderful book or entering a dark cinema after the intermission, where you realize that the good parts are already over, and hereafter it's just a reluctant trot till you reach the back cover or till the credits roll up. It's a pretty depressing thought when you make peace with the fact that your yesterdays now outnumber your tomorrows, and so many innocent dreams shall never see light of the day in this lifetime. Little by little, as you grow older, you start shedding your dreams and making peace with each departure as you head into the next leg. One by one, you start saying your goodbyes to people and to places. And the worst part is, all this happens when you're too caught up in your theater, donning masks and playing roles. Then one fine day, you realize that you're 40-something and suddenly cornered by life. You may not want to believe it, but you are now among those elderly lot, comical people who walk slow, who speak slow, who eat slow, who think slow, and who often also tell the same stale jokes again and again, thinking that they are still being funny. At 20, you were a challenger to the gods. After 45, staying respectfully human remains your only humble challenge. Hence, this episode, to examine if life indeed needs to fade out or it can continue being a growth adventure. During my recent visit to India, I met up with my colleague turned friend, Debo Banerjee, after 7 years. And I was literally stunned at his physical transformation. And the conversation that followed, because we are almost around the same age group, we chatted about life in general and the 4 pillars that make for a better life. Today, Debo and I will not talk shop, but we'll discuss these 4 pillars and offer some non-prescriptive practices that we've discovered through self-learning and which may help others who are also lost in their existential dilemma like we used to be. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend, Mr. Debobroto Banerjee, to Towards a Better World. Welcome, Debo.
Thank you, Ayon. I've watched with growing admiration over the years how you have transformed into a blogger and author, best-selling author, and an influencer. While you've still retained your corporate and grown your corporate identity, I am really delighted to be on your show today, Ayon, especially because this topic for me too is very close to my heart. I am no expert on any of this, but I'm happy to share whatever has worked for me and what hasn't. But equally, and more importantly, I'm keen to pick your brain on a few of these topics and take away some learnings from today's session.
Right. Thank you, Debo. That's very humble of you. And if we can bring out even a portion of all that we discussed when we met in Gurgaon, I think it will be a huge learning for so many people who have tuned in. Thanks for doing this for us. So let's dive into it, Devo, shall we? I mean, I just spoke of your physical transformation. So let's start there. I mean, I knew, and you used to be always a physically fit person, but the transformation I saw was very radical in terms of your overall health and fitness, and some tips that you shared with me. I would like you to share some of them with our viewers, your thoughts on health and fitness, and how did you restructure your approach to health and fitness? And if you could offer some top do's and don'ts about physical well-being, Devo.
Sure. Yeah. So let's start from the very beginning. So I've been, as you said, a bit of a sportsman and kind of jack of all trades over the years. Um, I've played a lot of sports growing up, but I've never had any structured approach to health. I've played sports because of the love of it. But as over time life happens. I got married and I had two kids, and I got caught in the treadmill of work and life. And before I realized, the effects of metabolism started to show with age. What also didn't help was that I was a fairly regular smoker. I never gave any importance to sleep, and I was a down to earth foodie, as you know, as a Bengali. I used to fill my plate with sweetmeats and all kinds of binge stuff. So right after I turned 40, Ayon, my biomarkers turned south. We all get to our biomarkers only when we go for our annual health checkup. So lo and behold, in one of the checkups right after I turned 40, it showed that the doctor said I've got high BP, I'm on a pre-diabetes range, and I also have cardiovascular issues. So I was put in a series of pills. Um, but I always thought I'm going to fight this, and they said you've got to work out. So I said I'm working out. So I kind of increased my intensity and so on and so forth. Extremely haphazard, never a structured way. But then COVID happened. And during COVID, I kind of reflected on my health. I had two growing children at home, and I turned to reading a lot of health and fitness stuff. I consulted friends who were in fitness, and then I realized that this has to be a wholesome approach. It's not a quick fix. And a lot of people, we don't know this, but I read about it. Uh, there is something known as sarcopenia and osteopenia that sets in, and that this is something that nobody can avoid. So sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass over time with aging, and osteopenia is loss of bone density with aging. Um, that's the bad news, that it has to happen to everyone. But the good news is that you can prevent it, or you can delay the effects of sarcopenia and osteopenia. And as I started reading a lot about this stuff online and books, I found there are a few things that if you focus on, or at least it worked for me, is when you do your training, if you do it in a structured way. So before I get to training, so the three things that work. One, of course, is exercise, and the benefits of exercise far outweigh any disbenefits of bad habits like drinking or smoking or binge eating. So exercise clearly is number one. Next is diet, and none of this is in any specific order. Yeah, they're all equally important. And the third is sleep. So exercise, health, and diet. So if we were to sort of double click on the exercise bit, the three areas that I focused on is one is zone 2 training, and I'm going to come to that in a bit. The other is known as VO2 max. And in all of this, there is something known as RHR, that is the resting heart rate. So let me tell you about zone 2. Zone 2, in a very simplistic term, and this is something that people can look up on the net, and I would very strongly recommend you do, because what happens is you get into this whole goal, I want to get fit, and you start doing a lot of running, you do a lot of lifting, And after a certain age, you really can't do it that way. So zone 2 is you're building an aerobic base. It's building your cardiovascular fitness. So if simply put, zone 2 is when you're training over a long period of time, when you can speak to somebody. So it's about 60 to 70% of your peak heart rate, and you can continue to do your workout. So it's a easy level. So if you're on a cycle, you can do some regular cycling over a period of time. If you're running at about 7 to 8 kilometers per hour, and you do it on a regular period. So that's zone 2 training. And it's very, very highly recommended for people who are growing older. Yeah. So the second is VO2 max. What is VO2 max? It's the volume of oxygen that is required when you're doing your training. So the higher the VO2 max is, the better it is. And I've read this. Statistics say that higher the VO2, in all the parameters of all-cause mortality, if you have a high VO2 max, that is a real indicator of longevity. So, and there are ways for you to increase your VO2 max. So it's basically building an aerobic base. The third is RHR, which is resting heart rate. So the higher the VO2 max, the better. In the same way, lower the resting heart rate is better. So resting heart rate means how quickly, a low heart rate would be how quickly can you come down to a resting state from a period of extreme exercise. So just to give you an example, elite athletes who are, operating at the peak of their sport typically have a resting heart rate in the range of 35 to 40. Whereas an average person would have a heart rate at about 70, 65 to 75. The higher it is, the worse it is. So these are the things that
mine is in the 60-ish range. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's good. That's good. 60 is pretty good. You should work on bringing this down, but there's a whole lot of factors to help it. But 60 at our age is par for the course. The other thing that I focused on, Ayon, is sleep. Ideally, you should have 8 hours of sleep. With our kind of schedule, I try and manage with 7 hours. Earlier, I was not very focused on it. The last thing that I worked on is on diet. I think diet is a very, very important part. I cleaned up my diet. I cut down sugar mainly. I quit smoking completely. It's now been 2 years. I'm absolutely off smoking. And the one thing that also that helped as a part of my diet is intermittent fasting, which is time restricted diet, right? So I manage the 16-8 thing. So I have 8 hours of window at a stretch in the day where I can eat, and the remaining 16 hours I go without food. Uh, and now it's come to a point, like I said, I've transitioned 180 degrees from being a foodie to now where I use food as fuel. It's protein intensive food, and I take only as much as I need. And the rest of the times, I don't even have the urge so much now. But yes, there are times, as I said, I have two growing boys at home. So we do have times when we have to binge. So once in a while, binging is fine. You got to live a little, right? And also, as I went down this journey, I realized that this whole uh, concentrated calorie available at the click of a button on our phone, all of this is the modern world thing. Our hunter gatherers, they really busted their ass to get their 3,000 calories a day. And now we have to just call a Zepto or a Blinkit, and our calories are there at our doorstep. The other piece, which maybe I missed this, equally important, is breathing. The one thing that really helped me is this conscious nasal breathing. So whenever you're running or working out, you have this whole thing of wanting to breathe in more, which is normal. But the trick is to be able to try and do this breathing with the nose. It has worked for me. Okay. And like I said, all of this is based on the reading that I did. So, I do a few other things like, my regular schedule is mixed with um, running, which is something, we've talked about the runner's high. So I do a bit of running, but now I've cut down on running and I've increased on strength training because strength training is very, very important. The other is mobility exercise. You got to keep your joints supple. And all of this eventually, led to a point where I went for my testing again, my biomarkers. And in the last couple of years, the doctors weaned me off these medications. And right now, I'm completely lifestyle disease medication free. So none of the medication that I used to take is something that I need anymore.
Congratulations.
So yeah, so in summary, I would say that what worked for me is to have a long-term and wholesome view on my health. And I also think that consistency beats intensity. It's all about health span versus lifespan. And if I may take a quick 10-second on this, the reason why I say health span versus lifespan is, come to think about it, our lifespan has gone up. Even in India, it's gone up, right? Life expectancy. But if you look around, you will find that people are living the marginal decade in a very bad situation. People are either bedridden or they are walking with difficulty, or. So I would say that increase your health span and live the best life you can for as long as you can live, rather than just extending the years in your life. So to end your question, I would say the do's and don'ts that you said. One is regular exercise. Second is protein heavy diet in the right portions. The third is prioritize sleep. So what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't smoke. I am a big believer in no smoking. You don't go into junk food, processed food, sugary food. And the third thing you shouldn't do is lead a sedentary lifestyle. So that, in summary, is my journey and my takeaways from what I have done in the last 4 5 years.
You want to share the books, the names of the books that you shared with
Oh
me?
yeah, yeah. So look, there are three books that really work for me. I would very strongly recommend Outlive by Peter Attia. And Peter Attia, Dr. Peter Attia in general, he's in many ways somebody I really follow. Any video that he posts on his website, I think I'm the first one who sees it, right? So Peter Attia also, he's very fond of Formula One, just like I am. His favorite sportsman is Ayrton Senna. He, in fact, has named his son Ayrton. I'm also a big fan of Ayrton Senna in Formula One, but that's again for a different discussion. So Peter Attia, you can also go to peterattia.com. He's the gold standard. The other is on breathing. Called the book is Breathe by James Nestor, and the last one, equally recommended, is Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. Why We Sleep. So all these three books are game changers, in my opinion, on health.
Awesome. Thanks, Debo. That was a fantastic summary and great nuggets of wisdom, Debo. And the best thing is the way you explained it is that anyone who's keen to transform their health can simply choose to follow these simple pointers, and the results should follow almost immediately. And so, like you said, health span and the increasing lifespan has led to people not having the right quality of life in the later decades. And it is not just the health, but it is also finances, as we've seen, because like in insurance, they say that there are two risks of insuring a person. One is that the person may live too short, or he or she may live too long. So now that if somebody lives longer, so as the lifespan of humans keeps increasing with progress in science and technology and nutrition and medicine, the need for financial security also keeps rising. So as we continue, and we need to live with dignity in our twilight years. So during our chat, you spoke of some very practical tips on personal finances, and which were very eye-opening for a financial illiterate like me. I am very bad with finances. So can you please share some key ideas on financial well-being that any layman listening to this podcast can start and put into use, Devo?
So my story on personal finances, and I can go on and on till the cows come home on this. And I must say a quick little anecdote in this. When my son came home from university this time, I got both my boys together and we did I did a presentation to them on finances, on personal finances. So I wanted to get to a level where I could explain it to them, as opposed to big jargony, charty stuff that you hear from people. But anyway, to answer your question, let from the very beginning, like in the case of health, again, I did not have any structured approach to personal finance. I was way too focused on increasing at the end of the year my compensation through the work that I did in the year. The percentage increase in compensation was to me so important that I completely ignored the alpha I was losing out on idle money, which was just lying in the bank. Not that it was a lot, but whatever it was not, money was not working for me. I was working for money. So you got to get to a stage where that inflection point comes, where you stop working for money and the money starts working for you, right? And that's where I want to bring in this amazing concept, the most basic concept, which is what Albert Einstein called as the eighth wonder of the world, called the power of compounding. And I wish this is something that is taught in schools a lot, with lot more emphasis than it is now. So the power of compounding is something which I can just quickly give you an example. Let's say you have viewers who are at age 20, okay? And at age 20, you start a SIP. Okay, so before that, let me tell you this. Uh, as far as investment is concerned, investing is putting money which gives you a certain return. So let's say you are putting money in the stock market. Now, stock market will go up and it will go down. Now, what we have seen, and this is based on actual data, the last 20 years, stock market has given you a return at a 15% CAGR, at 15% compounded annual growth rate. So let's take that 15% as the base case for us. And at age 20, you're putting 25,000 rupees per month, every month, until you retire, which is at the age of 60. So for 40 years, you put 25,000 rupees per month, which fetches you an annual growth rate of 15%. Can you imagine what will the amount be at the age of 60? It's going to fetch you 80 crores. So 25,000 per month you put from the age 20. When you're retiring, you can take away a clean 80 crores. But here's the interesting part. Instead of 20 years, you started the investment just 5 years late. At the age of 25, you started that 25,000 investment. Then at the time of retirement, that 80 will go down all the way down to 37 crores, a mere 37 crores by the delay of 5 years. And this is the final one. If you were to delay it to, let's say, starting at the age of 40, which is what I did, then that 25,000, if you went on till retirement, is going to fetch you a mere 4 crores. So the time value of this is what the power of compounding is. The power of compounding, when juxtaposed with the time value of money, is a real, it's a ballistic combination. So which is why I was telling you about that story when I did with my boys, is that, guys, you start investing early. If you start investing early, by the time you're old, you will have, created a nice little pile. But that's how the whole thing works, and there is also this whole thing about investing and trading. You would hear this. A lot of people say that I am a trader, I'm not an investor. Now, I don't know much about trading, and that's not something I even recommend. So you buy a stock, you flip it over, make the margins, and then you buy something else. That's not the game that I'm talking about. The investing philosophy that I believe in is something that you buy a right asset, whether it is a stock or an investment vehicle, and let it earn over a period of time, which comes back to the point I was saying about making your money work for you. And also, you never should confuse, like I said, investment and trading, but even more so in Indian context, you should not confuse investing with insurance. We've heard so much about people coming and telling you that buy this ULIP from me, unit linked insurance plan. Buy it for 50,000 rupees every month, pay it for 4 years. At the end of 10 years, I'm going to give you 4 lakh back. And you're like, hey, I'm just paying 50,000. At the end of 10 years, this guy's going to give me 4 lakh. Let's go for it. But you know what? If you were to put in the same process, 50,000 for every year for 4 years, and then you don't have to do anything, and you were to have put it in a SIP that fetched you a 15% return, at the end of 10 years, you can take away a cool 8 lakh rupees. And that is how the power of compounding works. So insurance and investment, these are not something that you should club together. They are two separate things. Anyway, back to my story.
Just buy a term insurance and make your investment as a separate thing.
Absolutely right. If you have to go for insurance. So by the way, I had a term insurance, but now I am not even with the term insurance. Because once you get to a point where you think that you can take care of the urgent needs that might crop up, then you would rather put the term in, because as you get older, the premium for even the term insurance is a little bit higher, and you would want to rather make that premium work for you than sit on the term insurance. I can help you do the math. But let's get back to the whole thing about, again, during COVID, I decided to put my financial house in order. I rearranged my portfolio to have a fair mix of debt, equity, etc. And I was lucky for that. It was a decision I took, not with any foresight, but in the 2020, 2021 period, things had really gone down during COVID, and it's only gone up ever since. So some of my best returns have come from the investments that I made during the COVID period. But going forward, I did make a lot of mistakes. But the fun part about investing is that if you get to understand the whole scenario, the trend line is always up if you're doing it in the right way, not in a cowboyish way. And then there's also something I can talk to your viewers about, which is the NPS. This is a very under-marketed scheme by the government. The government of India has this NPS 1 and 2, and tier 2 is something which is really like a mutual fund with a very low expense ratio. Today, if you go and buy a mutual fund, you have to pay about 1.5% to 2% expense ratio upfront, and thereafter for over the years. But NPS 2, you can buy the same mutual funds. I mean, you don't have that entire bouquet of mutual funds, but good fund houses, mutual funds, and they fetch you at the same rate of return, but your expense ratio is 0.2, 0.3%. So look, I'm a big believer in equity. I also am aware that the bull market will not last forever, right? So eventually what happens is that the market price of a stock and the fundamentals of the stock will eventually collide. They will come to a point. So unless you are buying some momentum stocks and getting blown into some recommendations by some finfluencer or a business journalist, as long as you have done, see, look, I have some knowledge of the Indian industry and I understand financial statements. I also have a rule of scanning through a few metrics, and I don't go by advice of any, finfluencers or TV stuff. I look at the P ratio. I look at the P ratio of that segment. I look at the return on equity. I look at growth rate of the company. I look at the cash generation of the company. And I look at it, whether that sector which it operates in, is it a scalable sector? Based on all these questions, I'm good to go for a go or a no-go decision. Right. So some of these things are very simple because there are just so many hundreds and thousands of stocks. But equally, as you grow older, your investment philosophy, okay, let me back up. It's not only when you grow older, it's at any age. Your investment philosophy has to be in sync with your mindset. So if you are a risk-averse person, and you want to have money which you can't afford to lose, then you should not put it in the stock market. You only put that amount of money in the stock market which you can not really afford to lose, but it's something that you can play with. If it goes down for a period of 6 months, you can still get by. And then you should have a good mix of equity and debt, and you should have gold. But there is a lot of people who talk about real estate. Okay, I just want to quickly touch upon real estate for a bit. Um, I believe in buying real estate, but I believe in buying one real estate, and that real estate is the house to stay in. I don't believe in real estate as one in which you can speculate in something you can trade or treat it as an investment. Beyond one house, a real estate is essentially a very, very illiquid thing. It is a big ticket item. You just can't buy a bathroom or a kitchen. You have to buy the whole damn house. And when you have to sell, you can't sell only part of it. You have to sell the whole thing. And then there is maintenance costs, there is transaction costs, and whole host of other unknowns. Capital gains, etc. Yeah, all of this really makes it, at least for me, a big no-no. As far as I'm concerned, I have better alternative netbacks for that money. So I actually ended up recently selling a spare property that I had in Bangalore. It was fetching me a rent, but I did the math and I said that a 2%, 3% return on a property, because rental yields in India is in the range of 2 to 3%. I would rather use the capital and put it somewhere else, which will fetch me much higher. 2 to 3% doesn't even beat inflation, right? So my principle, Ayon, is that I'm not here to make my money really go crazy and make market beating returns. That's not my objective. My objective is to make sure that I have steady returns over a period of time such that I'm able, tax adjusted, I'm able to beat returns nice and truly. That's my investment philosophy. And so far it has worked out fine. But as I'm growing older, I'm reducing my equity portion and increasing my debt portion. And this is all, at the end of the day, we are all doing it to create a nest egg for the family, right? So that's really my objective. The last part I want to touch upon very quickly, Ayon, is on FIRE. You might have heard this term, financially independent, retire early. FIRE. This is a new jargon in the last couple of years that investment peddlers have been, tom-tomming about. To me, FIRE is really to keep their fires burning, their investment fires burning. As far as I'm concerned, if you're talking about retire early, why would you want to retire early? That means that you're not enjoying the job that you're doing. Go find something else to do. So I would think that if you want to be financially independent, that's a good thing. But that doesn't mean you have to retire. There are multiple calculators out there in the market to calculate what is the number you have to get a stage of where you can say I am financially independent. Whether it is 10 crores, whether it is 50 crores, whether it is 500 crores, it's different for different people, for different lifestyle. But you made a good point, Ayon. You said this, that as life expectancy goes longer, and you have to build your portfolio to a point where even after the active life is over, as in where your monthly check comes and that's over, you should be able to live the same quality of life, if not a better quality of life. If you are traveling business class, you should continue to travel business class. If you are driving a fancy car, you should continue to drive a fancy car. So there are lots of tools in this. There is something known as SWP. You might have heard of this. This is called a systematic withdrawal plan. So you build a corpus. What you do is, depending on what your age is, you fast forward to a point where you are going to have no active salary coming in, and you do a estimation of your useful life after that. Let's say you are at 60, you don't have any salary coming in, and you want to live till 90. So you do the math for 60 to 90, and what money you should have at 60, such that if you park it in certain funds, it will help you withdraw, a systematic withdrawal of, let's say, X lakh rupees per month for you to go on till 90, while the capital is going to remain largely protected. It will not be absolutely protected, but largely protected. So a lot of these things, look, the other part of this discussion is that Indians, and this is something that people can relate to is that Indians are actually very good at saving money. Okay, we are good at building a corpus, but not many of us know how to use the corpus while you're alive. I'm building the corpus and living frugally, but when I'm at 60, I have maybe a fair sum of money. What do I do with that? It's like having to eat apple when you don't have your teeth, right? So I would again in this I would recommend the book. It's called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. So the ideal way to live is for you to build a corpus such that you live your life, blow it all up, and when you are really kicking the bucket, you're zero in the bank. So that's the whole concept of Die with Zero. So so broadly, these are some of the philosophies that I follow in life. Finally, you and I are we have this common passion for movies. So as Jim Carrey once said, I would want everyone to get rich so that they can realize that's not the answer, right? At the same time, the same guy, Jim Carrey, said that it is said that money doesn't buy you happiness. I don't know much about that, but I can tell you for sure that poverty certainly doesn't buy you happiness, right? So really, at the end of the day, it is horses for courses. Everyone has to decide what they have to do, but it should be something that you do it on a conscious, well-planned basis, right?
Great tips. Thanks, Devo. Fantastic.
Right. So, Ayon, here is my turn to turn the table and ask you a few questions. Yeah. Um, you have been a person who has uh, donned several hats. You're a writer, you're a blogger, you are working on overlapping boundaries of work and life. And I wanted to get your views on a topic that's raging in everyone's mind in the world today: mental health and work life balance. For the benefit, at least for me and also for your viewers, can you share the key issues that cause burnout in today's life? And what are some workable tips that one can use to stay sane as you juggle work, your family, your writing, and the multiple hats that you don?
Great pertinent point, Devo. Thanks for asking. And I think, mental health is, of course, on the top of the agenda of most people these days. We reach so much. And first of all, I wanted to give a personal confession make a personal confession is that I don't believe in this phrase called work-life balance, because I think that work is not an umbrella which you leave outside when you enter life, or vice versa. I think work and life, they overlap, and they should overlap if you actually want to lead an authentic life. And I think the key hurdles to today's the mental unrest that people go through, which turns into burnout. I think if I am asked, I think there are three main reasons. So the first one is, probably you have read about it, is it's called the Dr. Daniel Amen's rule, which is the 18-40-60 rule, basically, which states that at 18 you are very concerned about what everyone else is thinking about you. At 40, you give a darn what anybody is thinking about you. And at 60, you realize that nobody had been thinking about you at all. So basically, FOMO on steroids is the problem of today's. FOMO means fear of missing out in today's connected world. Thousands of years back, Aristotle had said that potters envy only potters. But today, everybody is envying everybody else, because we are always aspiring to a glossed up version of the lives on display by others, and which may not be their real life. Actually, it is just a glossed up and an external version of their lives. So most of us, we spend the first half of our lives trying to earn some kind of a fake social identity for ourselves, and in the second half of our lives we spend that trying to protect or sometimes salvage that same identity. And what a waste of a life. So I think that's number one. Number two is, there is a value mismatch. Whenever we have a mismatch in terms of our internal values and how we are living life, lack of authenticity, we get a mental agony which turns into burnout. So and we get an imposter syndrome. So I think there are three primary triggers of which drives human beings: need, greed, and fear. And today, thanks to social media and AI bots and everything, uh, we have these three triggers amplified by a million times all around us, and we are constantly bombarded by things which make us lead a life which is not true to our truest self. So you are an Indian and a cricket fan, Devo, so you will remember that Multan test in 2004 where Sehwag scored the first 300 for an Indian, and he was batting in his late 290s, and common sense would have had it that he would have batted very defensively, but instead this guy
It's
moves
for the
ahead,
six.
he hits a six. So when
Yeah.
we are young, all of us have a Sehwag inside us. We are the superhero of our personal stories. But little by little, as we grow older, we get defensive about public opinion, and we play to not lose rather than playing to win. And this value mismatch makes us uneasy about ourselves and gives us this imposter syndrome. That was number two. And number three is, like you said, with finances and with health, there are a lot of gurus out there these days. Suddenly they have popped up in this internet era. These are the people who will come up on these TED talks and give the youngsters lectures on find your why, find your passion, do this and do that. And what happens is, these gullible youngsters, the poor guys, they might be the poor boys and girls, I mean, they might be doing a good day job, but they'll get into a guilt psyche that probably I'm not doing good enough, I need to find something else to do. But with due respect to these influencers who have no real life experience, but they spoil the lives of others. So nobody actually goes and starts with a why, like our famous author friend has said. You discover your why by keeping doing the what's of daily life. So you should never squander the holy ordinary in the quest of some illusory profound. So what can be done? I have some very basic earthy desi things which I follow, and I try to coach this to my younger friends. I'll share some of them here. So first is, it's okay to be not okay. Perfection is very overrated. Just be the best first hand you. Don't try to be the second best second hand somebody else. Number two, tasks and work. Most of us professionals in corporate world, we take pride in saying that, I live by my Outlook calendar. If you reflect on this, this is actually stupid, because what is your Outlook calendar? Your Outlook calendar is a series of meetings which are basically tasks, and which tasks means they are someone else's work. And what you do is you schedule for your tasks and you push your real work in the leftover gaps, which is very stupid, isn't it? You should actually schedule for work and you should push the tasks in the leftover gaps. So I think the biggest superpower that we miss is the word no. I think you should just say no to anything that is a task which is disguised as work. You should prioritize your work over tasks. And because your work, whenever you do a cognitively challenging work, you release endorphins, which is the nature's feel good hormone, and you feel good about yourself. But the moment you do this, checking your phone, checking your emails every 5 minutes, you release dopamine, which is like a drug. And you should always the rule is you should prioritize endorphins over dopamine. And that's how you reclaim your day and you reclaim your life. You can actually restructure your work day. I feel we sometimes behave like herds. You will see at sharp 12 noon, the whole organization is walking out for lunch. Why do you have to go together? I mean, you have a crowded cafeteria, you waste time there. Instead, go at 11 or go at 1 and use that quiet hour in the office to do some deep work. So these kind of things, stay near to office, or work from home, save those 2 hours of commute, and do something productive for your life. So I think these are some, you can reclaim your life by reclaiming your day. Number three is optimize your focus, because there's a saying that space has energy and time has vibes. So we all have our own biological body clocks. So you may be an owl or a lark, depending on which is your best hour in the day. And if you are an owl, for example, who works best at night, and if you try to do your most difficult task or work at 6 a.m. in the morning, you'll probably not do a good job out of it. So you should club your biggest frog to eat, like Brian Tracy says, in your peak hour, whichever is your peak hour. And you should, the space that you work in should have the right energy. You should have everything that you need to do your work, because we always look for hiding places. So we find that something is missing and we postpone the real work. So you should make sure your space has everything around. When you get into work, just work all the time you work. That's number 3. Number 4 is disconnect. Most of us, how we spend our work days is that we are constantly on our computer. Whenever an email is coming, immediately we have to reply. We are the fastest email response. We want to win that prize. You don't need to do that. You can actually check your emails twice or thrice a day, and that's good enough for anybody, I guess. That helps you connect with your deepest self, and that's where you get your creative ideas, and all your deeper concepts come out from there. Unless you declutter, that won't come. Schedule your downtime, because we all feel that we'll have a downtime when work gets over, but work never gets over. So work always finds new work. So you should schedule your vacations. And vacation doesn't just mean that you should schedule those Caribbean exotic vacation. Schedule a 15-minute vacation at 4 p.m. Put it on your calendar or on your diary that at 4 p.m. I'm going to switch off everything and going to listen to that music video, or I'm going to read, or I'm going to put a blog post out there, whatever it is. And lastly, and you can, of course, when you do that, you have to have an unwind button and a reset button all the time. So, to give you an example, my unwind button is writing. So every evening when I am writing on my blog, my brain gets a signal that my work day is over. And next morning when I'm in the gym, when I'm working out, my brain again gets a signal that rise and shine, your day has started. So that's what. And finally, I think every youngster and even people of our age should keep a journal. You should document your days, because most of us sleepwalk through life in autopilot days. We never actually wait and learn from our days. So what worked, what didn't work, what could have gone better. And once you start a journal, it's a very powerful self-growth tool.
Yeah.
And the last tip I would like to give to my younger friends is that when you switch off at night, try to write down what you need to accomplish on the next day. And by write down, it's not type it or put it on your smartphone, but actually write it with a pen on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
When you do it, there is something magical which happens, is that, when you release it on paper, it goes and settles in your subconscious mind. And when you're sleeping, miraculously, 70% of your problems and challenges get resolved. So I have seen this work, and you can try this. So these are some tips which, if followed, friends, they can help you with coping with what we call as burnout or whatever we call it. So that's it, Devo, I think.
Great insights, Ayon. Apart from your younger friends, I have taken some really good learnings, and really the aspect of journaling stuff is just so powerful. And this is something which is so underrated, hugely talked about, but very not done as often as one would like to. Yeah. So I would also want to, in addition to what you just said, I would recommend the viewers to go on to your LinkedIn feed to see a lot of the amazing stuff that you have written, which will, sort of embellish a lot of the stuff that you have said, the real nuggets of wisdom that have come from your pen and, your mind. So finally, Ayon, what's beyond the dust and ashes? So we've talked about mental health. Who are we outside the superficiality of life? And how do we connect to the core that lies beneath our existential flux? When we had met in Gurgaon, you had shared some very intriguing insights on your inner journey. You had talked about some daily practices that help you connect with your deeper self. And in turn, you said that brings you a lot of calm. So can you share, for the benefit of the viewers, what spirituality really means for you? And are there simple ways in which we can connect with our higher self in the midst of all this that's going on, this whole internet related chaos in general, on top of the real chaos that anyway we deal with? So what does spirituality mean, and what are the simple ways for us to connect with our higher self?
A very deep subject. I don't know if I can do justice to it. First of all, because it cannot be captured in a small capsule of time. And secondly, I am still a novice. I am still taking baby steps, trying to get my act together, trying to understand things. And it's a never-ending process. So you get to one stage, and then you realize that there is a whole lot of things that you need to learn further. So in very basic terms, Devo, you might have heard of this saying we grew up on, that where science ends, philosophy begins. And where philosophy ends, spirituality begins. So let's start there. So why spirituality? So let's start with the purpose of life itself. What is, if you ask yourself, deeply, what is the purpose of my life? You will see at the very core of it, the purpose of everyone's life is we want to be happy, right? Everyone wants to be happy. But what do you mean by happiness? Is happiness just pleasure? Probably not. So happiness means it is the end of suffering, like the Buddha said. So again, next question. So what is suffering? So if you again deep dive there, you will see suffering is basically when you get what you don't want in life, or when you don't get what you are craving for. So that is preferences. We all have preferences of how life should unfold. And whenever life doesn't unfold as per our preferences, suffering rises. And so we begin there. So the first question to ask is, who has these preferences? You will notice that it's your constant thoughts that are going through your mind that manufacture these preferences. So scientists say that average humans have anywhere between 60 to 70,000 thoughts in a day. And so the next thing to ponder is, who thinks these thoughts? So most of us assume that we have a brain, and a mind is an biological organ inside the brain, which starts thinking these thoughts. But if you observe, you will see you actually don't think any thoughts. Thoughts are it's like a never ending conveyor where they keep coming and they keep going. And your mind basically picks up thoughts, thoughts which pretend to be very important for you, and which give you an illusion of happiness or sadness by either reliving a past moment or imagining a future moment. So you pick up thoughts from that conveyor, and those thoughts make sure that you are either happy or unhappy for the moment. And then the next thought comes in. So if you can somehow slow down the thoughts and detach your inner self from this tool called the mind, because your mind is not a real thing. If your mind is basically just a bundle of thoughts. So if you can detach yourself from your mind, you can probably find the suffering ending, because all suffering is because of thoughts. So if you read Western spirituality, at least if you go back till the early 20th century, the mental science writers, whether it's Thomas Troward, Dr. Ernest Holmes, or later folks like Neville Goddard, U.L. Anderson, Joseph Murphy, or even very contemporary Rhonda Byrne, who have all written and, popularized, which is known as the law of attraction, which they call it in the Western world. They teach you that law of attraction in very simple ways means that you don't think what you don't want, you just think what you want, and that will manifest in your life. But how it differs from how the Eastern scriptures differ, because I have been an explorer. I have read Western, I have read Buddhism, and then come back to Eastern spirituality, reading the Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dual spiritual texts of Hindu spirituality. So Advaita Vedanta says that this entire subject-object concept, that is, there is something out there which you have to get. And it could be an emotion, it could be a material thing, or whatever it is. And whenever there is a subject and there is an object out there, you will stay trapped in Maya, which is basically illusion. And till you are in Maya, the suffering won't go. Even if Maya comes disguised as pleasure, it has a cycle, and the next cycle will be suffering. So ultimately, we think that we control life. But there is the Hindu scriptures say, our Advaita Vedanta says that everything about our lives is prarabdha, which is destiny. So basically, your script for life is pre-written. You cannot change your script of life by any means, whatever you do. What you can do is the best you can do, and what is your duty in this lifetime in the human form is that you let life flow from within without corrupting it or obstructing its flow with your brain, with your mind and your thoughts. Because more you obstruct, what will happen is you have a certain quota of prarabdha which has to flow out through you. And if you obstruct it, maybe you will just 10% will flow out and 90% will not happen. And then you get trapped in the circle of rebirths. And till the time it has not flowed out completely. I'm simplifying it too much, but till the time it doesn't flow out completely, you don't get enlightened or moksha or whatever we call it. So Eastern spiritual practice says man minus mind is equal to God. So basically, The only thing that separates us from the deepest self, you call it God, you call it whatever you want to call it, that is the mind. So if you can, so the practices, day-to-day practices should be how you can quieten or silence the mind. So some regular practices, and these are some fun experiments, everybody can do this and try to do this. So you might have heard of Emmett Fox and his 7-day mental diet, which basically says is that for 7 days in a row, you reject that conveyor belt that we spoke of. From that conveyor belt, you don't pick up any negative thought, not even a single negative thought. So it doesn't mean that the negative thoughts won't arise. They will come. The negative thoughts will come. You just don't pick it up. That's it. It's coming. You just watch it. It goes away. That's it. But it's easier said than done. I have tried to do this a number of times and I have failed miserably. Sooner or later, within a few hours, you will pick up a negative thought. So it's very difficult to do that. What you could rather do is for one full day, just stay completely awake and observe every thought that rises in your waking hours. And you will realize that when you are alert, suppose, whenever you're alert, you will see that you catch a thought after it has left you. So for example, you're walking down the road, there's a person coming from the other side. You will form a judgment about that person in your mind. And if you're alert, you will notice that judgment after the judgment has happened. So basically, you catch a thought after it has left you. So the trick is, if you are so vigilant that you wait for the thought and you don't let it go out to find a subject, that's where what happens is this entire, the mind turned outwards, the thoughts which go outwards through your mind or through your senses, it is basically what we call the ego. So if you can stop it from going outwards, the ego turns inwards. And when you turn inwards, you see whatever the consciousness inside you, and it slowly dissolves inside. So staying 100% alert for one single day, and this is a great experiment to start with, you will uncover the deepest, miracles and secrets of your own life if you try it for one day. Practice number one. Practice number two is the might of surrender. Surrender has got a very negative connotation at least in the Western world, but actually surrender is a very, very powerful human practice, because surrender is basically the basis of all faiths. So we normally say, that I have faith in God. But the moment we wish for something and it doesn't work as per the exact ways that we had imagined it to be, we think that, probably God is not efficient enough, or maybe God is not paying attention. And we try to micromanage how God should do it. And then we tell God that, God, I believe in you, but provided you give me the promotion by next February. So that's not faith or surrender. It is basically you are ordering God to do something and it never works. So surrender is basically what Taoists do, like Tao Te Ching, if you've learned. So basically, for one day, you just let life flow through you. You just don't micromanage. Let it be. It can be unpleasant, it can be fun, it can be whatever. Maybe you will feel that I'm not doing something important enough. Don't do that. Just let your life flow through you and surrender to the flow of life one day. That's it. And then you will see, you will get hooked to it. And number three is finding out what is truth. So in Eastern spirituality, truth is basically what is never changing, which doesn't change. So whatever we see outside externally, whether it is an object, whether it is an emotion, whether it is a place or building or vegetation or an animal, all these things keep changing. So nothing stays constant. So that means they cannot be the truth. But if you look inwards, you will see what you have, a living spirit or consciousness or whatever you call it, which is inside you. And you will see that has never changed. The same consciousness which was inside Debo when Debo was 5 years old, that same consciousness is there when he was 20, when he was 30, when he was 40 or 45. So that has never changed. So that must be the truth. So if you can flip it around, and instead of letting being a subject and finding objects outside, if you can turn it around and look at inside, so that is the end and the dissolution of your ego and the illusions, at least temporarily. So there are and when the mind temporarily when there is a cessation of the mind, which happens temporarily in Hindu spirituality, it is called manolaya. So basically, for a period of time, your mind is not active and it is very peaceful. ultimately, of course, to get enlightened or moksha or whatever, I mean, people like me will never attain that, at least in next 1,000 lifetime. But the eventual goal is mano nasha. Basically, your mind needs to be killed. Once the mind is killed, that's where a human being attains the highest place. But by slipping into manolaya for time, and every day, a couple of hours, if you can make the mind sleep, put it to sleep, that gives you a lot of head start, and in terms of your journey of your prarabdha. I think these are some high level but simple practices which anybody can practice. And I think it was a long answer, but I don't know if it gave you some concept of what I've been reading about.
No, I mean, it just gives me a sense of how deep you've gotten into this subject. It was almost like a therapy session for me. This is really impressive and very interesting. Maybe at some point we need to have another session between you and I over a drink. But really, thank you, Ayon, for your insights in this. And as I said, that it does reflect on the depth of information and the depth of knowledge that you have on these topics. So yeah, that's great. I'm just a bit conscious of time. So
Yeah, so there are a number of questions. So there are questions, there are comments also. So I'll just leave out the comments. So I'll just read it out. So Nisha says hi. Aisha says hello. Today's topic is very interesting. Yusuf says hey guys. Swati is saying what should we prioritize for fulfilling a career and a life? So I think you and I have kind of touched upon it in different ways. So
yeah. So maybe I'll go first, Ayon, if that's okay. Career and life, the first thing I would say is that don't get bogged down too much into putting things in buckets. I would say let things play out. Just keep in mind the longer term goal, but you also got to live your present. Uh, and it always helps if you are working towards your career in a way where while you are adding value to yourself from a knowledge, skill, aptitude standpoint, but you also have to remember that you are making your money work just as hard as you are working yourself. And while you are doing that, you also make sure that you take good care of your health and make sure that your body is prioritized, your health is prioritized. In addition to, of course, your mental health, the overall thing. Like I said, this is all about balance. Life, all the four topics that we have, it has to all work in balance.
Very true. So yeah, I think that's what the Ali, I think Alisha had asked this question. How do you? No, Alisha has asked a different question. This was Swati's question. So Swati, the four pillars you need to balance, like Debo said, and we try to give you some pointers which we follow. We are probably older than you, so if we are following that, and we have realized it later, if you can short circuit your journey by a learning curve by trying to follow some of these. Alisha says, how do you filter out noise in your life? I think, I tried to mention that when I was speaking, Alisha, that, you have to declutter and, disconnect from the noise. And it is a very proactive thing. You have to do it yourself. Never get endorphins over dopamine. Basically, that's the trick. So Chirag says, in your wellness journey, sir, I think this would be addressed to you. What are some significant changes you made? How did it impact your overall life? I think you mentioned you left smoking, you put in your intermittent fasting.
No, I think if you prioritize your exercise, if you prioritize diet, and you prioritize sleep, you start with these three things, and these should be non-negotiable. It's like you wake up in the morning and brush your teeth. That's non-negotiable, right? So you have to make sure that you work out. Even start with 20 minutes walk in the morning. If you are somebody who's led a sedentary lifestyle, you start with a 20-minute walk. Do that for a few days. You get, as you said, the endorphins flowing, and then you increase it in steps. That's exercise. Even in diet, you realize that when you're eating, you start with having 80% of what you are eating now. A few days later, you do with 60% of what you're eating. Trust you me, after you've eaten that much of that 60%, actually you won't need it. Human beings, they tend to eat because the food is right there in front of them. And once you get, it's all about habit. Like I said, consistency. and discipline really will take you there. And sleep is equally important. I mean, I can't overemphasize that.
Correct. Absolutely. You should eat to live, don't live to eat. So,
Yeah,
so, so
yeah,
Samir was asking, I think you answered this already when you were talking, Devo. Financial concepts every student should understand before leaving school. I think you spoke how you have spoken to your sons, the power of compounding, somebody
absolutely.
investing at 20
You,
versus.
you, you should also know the rule of 72. So one is the power of compounding, and the other is the rule of 72. What is the rule of 72? It's the rule of 72 is the number of years it takes to double your money is 72 divided by the rate of return. So just to give you an example, if you have an investment that is at 12% rate of return and you divide 72 by 12, then it takes 6 years to double your money. So keep the rule of 72 in mind and keep the power of compounding, the amazing, the superhuman power of compounding in mind. I mean, I can never stress. There are lots of links out there online where you have Excel sheets. If you just play it out yourself, you put 25,000 rupees every month for 40 years at 15% CAGR, you are going to end up getting 80 crores. I mean, this is not magic. This is just power of compounding at work.
Absolutely, absolutely, totally agree. And very, very big eye opener for me. You actually made me feel guilty when you gave those calculations, and because I have missed the bus in this lifetime. But I hope the youngsters listening to it will listen and learn. So I think there are a lot of other comments. There were Maverick is saying quite an eye opener, and Samir said this, and so I think there are no further new questions. They are like repeat questions or similar sub questions. So I think we are up on time and 5 minutes over. So fantastic, Debo. Thanks a lot for doing this. And I think this will be a very useful session, even in the recorded version. I think it will be very useful. Some of the things that you spoke about, it will be very helpful for people who are starting out in life, at least. Thank you. Thanks for that, Debo.
Thank you. Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed this, Ayon. As always, good
Thank you.
to catch up with you. And thank you for the viewers to have stayed on for as long as they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening and great day, everyone who's listening in. Thank you.
Thank you.